Αγαπητοί τηλεθεατές του Hellenic TV, καλησπέρα σας. Άλλη μια εκπομπή OMOGENIA εδώ Λονδίνο θα σας κρατήσει παρέα και απόψε για την επόμενη ώρα. Στο απόψινό μας πρόγραμμα θα σας παρουσιάσουμε κάποιες από τις εκδηλώσεις που έγιναν πρόσφατα στην παροικία μας, καθώς και ένα απόσπασμα από την αποκλειστική συνέντευξη του ύπατου αρμοστή της Κυπριακής Δημοκρατίας στο Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο, κ. Αλέξανδρου Ζήνων, που έδωσε στο Hellenic TV. Απόψε λοιπόν θα σας παρουσιάσουμε τα εξής θέματα. Την παπαρικιακή συγκέντρωση για την καταδίκη του πραξικοπήματος και της βάρβαρης τουρκικής εισβολής στην Κύπρο που έγινε στο Κυπριακό Κοινοτικό Κέντρο στο Wood Green και την αρχιερατική λειτουργία που έγινε στην Εκκλησία των 12 Αποστόλων. Επίσης, τη συνάντηση και συζήτηση που έγινε στις 6 του μήνα στη Βουλή των Κοινοτήτων με θέμα τους αγνοούμενους της τουρκικής εισβολής, καθώς και την πιο πρόσφατη συνάντηση που έγινε την 3η 12 Ιουλίου στον ίδιο χώρο με θέμα το εθνικό πρόβλημα της Κύπρου. Τέλος, θα σας παρουσιάσουμε ένα απόσπασμα από την διάλεξη που έγινε στο Ελληνικό Κέντρο με θέμα Cyprus and the Sinai Icons. Πριν όμως ξεκινήσουμε, να σας υπενθυμίσουμε πως για τυχόν ερωτήσεις ή εισηγήσεις που μπορεί να έχετε σχετικά με την παραγωγή του προγράμματός μας, μπορείτε να επικοινωνείτε μαζί μας τηλεφωνικά στο 0208 292 7037 ή ηλεκτρονικά στο info@hellenictv.net. Απόψε θα ξεκινήσουμε με τη συνέντευξη του ύπατου αρμοστή της Κυπριακής Δημοκρατίας στο Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο. Την Παρασκευή 8 του μήνα, η κάμερα του Hellenic TV βρέθηκε στο κτίριο της Κυπριακής Υπάτης Αρμοστίας στο κεντρικό Λονδίνο. Ο Κύπριος ύπατος αρμοστής, κ. Αλέξανδρος Ζήνων, μας υποδέχτηκε στο γραφείο του και μίλησε στο δημοσιογράφο μας Γιάννη Ιωάννου. Στο βίντεο που ακολουθεί θα παρακολουθήσουμε ένα απόσπασμα από την εφόλη στη ύλη συνέντευξή του που έδωσε στο κανάλι μας.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, αγαπητοί φίλοι τηλεθεατές, καλησπέρα σας. Σήμερα βρισκόμαστε στο κεντρικό Λονδίνο, έξω από τα γραφεία και τα κτίρια της Κυπριακής Υπάτης Αρμοστίας, όπου θα έχουμε την ευκαιρία να συνομιλήσουμε με τον Κύπριο ύπατο αρμοστή, κ. Αλέξανδρο Ζήνων.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, καλησπέρα σας. Βρισκόμαστε στο γραφείο του ύπατου αρμοστή της Κυπριακής Δημοκρατίας στο Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο, κ. Αλέξανδρο Ζήνων. Κύριε ύπατο αρμοστή, Αλέξανδρε Ζήνων, καλώς ορίσατε στην ελληνική τηλεόραση, το Hellenic TV, και είναι μεγάλη χαρά που σήμερα έχουμε αυτή την ευκαιρία να βρίσκεστε μαζί μας.
Εγώ σας ευχαριστώ που είχατε την ιδέα να έρθετε να μιλήσουμε και ακόμη περισσότερο γιατί είναι η πρώτη μου παρουσία στην τηλεόραση σας.
Για αρχή θα θέλαμε να μας πείτε λίγα πράγματα για σας, για τον εαυτό σας. Από πού κατάγεστε, πού μεγαλώσατε και τι σπουδές έχετε κάνει.
Είμαι από τη Λεμεσό. Από τη Λεμεσό, αλλά τα σχολικά μου χρόνια τα πέρασα στη Λάρνακα. Εκεί τέλειωσα το σχολείο, το γυμνάσιο. Και στη συνέχεια σπούδασα νομικά στην Αθήνα, έκανα μετά μεταπτυχιακά στη Σορβόνη στο Παρίσι και διάφορα άλλα επιμορφωτικά σε εξειδικευμένα Ινστιτούτα και από το 1979, δηλαδή είναι τώρα 32 χρόνια σχεδόν, όχι 32 χρόνια τον περασμένο μήνα, είμαι στο Υπουργείο Εξωτερικών.
Πότε αναλάβατε καθήκοντα ύπατου αρμοστή στο Λονδίνο και πόσο δύσκολο είναι το έργο στο να εκπροσωπεί την Κύπρο σε μια μεγάλη χώρα όπως είναι το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο?
Τον επόμενο μήνα, τον Αύγουστο, κλείνω 3 χρόνια στο Λονδίνο. Ήρθα εδώ στις 15 Αυγούστου του 2008. Το Λονδίνο θεωρείται μια από τις πιο σημαντικές και πιο μεγάλες σε αριθμό προσωπικού διπλωματικές αποστολές της Κύπρου. Έχουμε περισσότερο από 50 πρόσωπα προσωπικό. Και αυτό βεβαίως δίνει και το μέγεθος και των ευθυνών και των δραστηριοτήτων μας. Φτάνει να σας πω ότι έχουμε γύρω στα 8-10 ξεχωριστά τμήματα εδώ, αρχίζοντας από το πολιτικό τμήμα της πρεσβείας, πηγαίνοντας στο γραφείο τύπου και πληροφοριών, στο πολιτιστικό τμήμα, στο εμπορικό, στο τμήμα ευημερίας, στο ναυτιλιακό, διότι παράλληλα είμαστε και διεπιστευμένοι στον Διεθνή Οργανισμό Ναυτιλίας που έχει την έδρα του στο Λονδίνο. Όπως γνωρίζετε επίσης υπάρχει και η Κυπριακή Εκπαιδευτική Αποστολή, η οποία υπάγεται τεχνικά στην Υπάτην Αρμοστία. Έχουμε το γραφείο του ΚΟΤ, του τουρισμού, και βεβαίως έχουμε τις διοικητικές και οικονομικές μας υπηρεσίες. Άρα είναι μια μικρογραφία κυβέρνησης η Υπάτη Αρμοστία στο Λονδίνο. Παρέλειψα ασφαλώς ένα από τα πιο σημαντικά μας τμήματα, το Γενικό Προξενείο, το οποίο έχει την ευθύνη και το μεγαλύτερο βάρος των σχέσεων μας με τους αποδήμους και με την παροικία μας, η οποία, όπως ξέρετε, είναι μερικές εκατοντάδες χιλιάδες πρόσωπα εδώ στη Μεγάλη Βρετανία.
Κοιτάζοντας το βιογραφικό σας, έχουμε παρατηρήσει ότι από νεαρή ηλικία ξεκινήσατε δυναμικά στην καριέρα σας και έχετε επιεργαστεί σε διάφορες ευρωπαϊκές χώρες και πόλεις.
Ναι.
Μιλάτε και αρκετές γλώσσες. Πότε και με ποια ειδικότητα ξεκινήσατε την καριέρα σας?
Όπως σας είπα, κλείνω 32 χρόνια. Ξεκίνησα το 1979, τον Ιούνιο, 18 Ιουνίου συγκεκριμένα. Και η πρώτη μου τοποθέτηση τότε ήταν στη Διεύθυνση Κυπριακού του Υπουργείου Εξωτερικών, όπου επί 2 χρόνια είχα το επώδυνο καθήκον να παρακολουθώ καθημερινά τις δηλώσεις του ντεκτάζ και να τις επισημαίνω στην πολιτική ηγεσία και να τις αναλύω κλπ. Και λέω ότι ήταν επώδυνο, διότι δεν είναι καθόλου ευχάριστο να ξυπνάς από το πρωί και να ασχολείσαι με το τι είπε και το τι έκαμε ο ντεκτάζ.
Ολόκληρη η συνέντευξη του ύπατου αρμοστή θα μεταδοθεί στις 20 Ιουλίου στις 7:45 το βράδυ στην εκπομπή με το φακό του Hellenic TV. Σήμερα συμπληρώνονται 37 ολόκληρα χρόνια από το προδοτικό πραξικόπημα του 1974, το οποίο οδήγησε στην βάρβαρη τουρκική εισβολή που έγινε 5 μέρες αργότερα στις 20 Ιουλίου. Την περασμένη Τρίτη, 12 Ιουλίου, πραγματοποιήθηκε στην Βουλή των Κοινοτήτων το καθιερωμένο λόμπι σχετικά με το εθνικό πρόβλημα της Κύπρου. Στη συζήτηση έλαβαν μέρος τα μέλη της Εθνικής Κυπριακής Ομοσπονδίας, εκπρόσωποι παροικιακών πολιτικών κομμάτων στο Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο, καθώς και Βρετανοί βουλευτές, φίλοι της Κύπρου, από όλες τις πολιτικές παρατάξεις του Βρετανικού Κοινοβουλίου. Η προσέλευση του κόσμου ήταν μεγάλη και τα θέματα που συζητήθηκαν ήταν πολλά και σημαντικά. Στο επόμενο βίντεο θα παρακολουθήσουμε μερικά αποσπάσματα από τις τοποθετήσεις Βρετανών βουλευτών σε διάφορα ζητήματα που συζητήθηκαν αναφορικά με το πρόβλημα της Κύπρου.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, αγαπητοί φίλοι τηλεθεατές του Hellenic TV, καλησπέρα σας. Σήμερα βρισκόμαστε στο κεντρικό Λονδίνο, έξω από τη Βουλή των Κοινοτήτων, όπου θα περάσουμε να παρακολουθήσουμε τη συζήτηση που θα γίνει σχετικά με το εθνικό πρόβλημα της Κύπρου. Επίσης, θα υπάρξουν πολλοί Βρετανοί βουλευτές, εκπρόσωποι της Εθνικής Κυπριακής Ομοσπονδίας και παράγοντες από την παροικία μας και εκπροσώποι πολιτικών κομμάτων εδώ στο Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο.
So many times over the years, we've talked about missing people. I have a letter in my home that was sent to me 21 years ago by the then Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, saying that her top priority on the Cyprus issue was that of missing people. And yet here we are, and rightly so, still talking about the lack of real progress. You, in your opening remarks, Peter, talked about the desecration of churches and cemeteries. And I've been into the occupied area and have seen it. The Morphu rally will be in October. And we are now able to go into Morphu. And you see, as you go in, 2 cemeteries, one which has been completely cemented over and is now a car park, and the other one where every single headstone has been deliberately broken and it is now a tipping dump for abandoned cars. And it has been like that for years. But when are we really going to say, enough is enough, and we don't want any more words about our concerns about the injustice? We know all about that. Now, Alan, when he was here, talked about the role that the British have played. But to me, Peter, the real big player in Cyprus is and could be the United States of America. We don't want to know whether they use our bases or not, but we do realize, and Alan again made reference to Joe Biden, the Vice President. But I was in America on a visit some years ago and meeting members of the Congress who said to me, "Have you heard the news?" And this was when Bill Clinton was the president. He then appointed what was regarded as one of the principal and most experienced United States negotiator as his special envoy for Cyprus, Richard Holbrooke. Well, how long did Holbrooke last, and what did he ever do as far as Cyprus was concerned? Absolutely nothing. And in the United States, like here, there have been Democratic presidents, there have been Republican presidents. We've had Conservative prime ministers, Labour prime ministers, and they've all talked about the injustice, about how they fully support the reunification of the island. But sadly, we haven't seen the real progress, as colleagues speaking to us this evening had said, and from the floor, until real pressure is put on Turkey, then Turkey will ignore, as they have done over the last 37 years, because they have never been forced to own up and say there are injustices. And we, if we want to be part of the European family, cannot continue to behave as we have ever since we invaded and now occupy much of the island of Cyprus. And the final point I make, Peter, is this. I would hope our members would send a joint letter, not to William Hague, but to David Cameron as the Prime Minister. Now, we know that Cameron and Obama talk and meet quite often. Has David Cameron ever said in his discussions with President Obama, one of the issues I want to sit down and talk to you solely about is the issue of Cyprus? And that is what I would hope, Peter, our colleagues here would do. Not to William Hague, but specifically to David Cameron, because I'm sure everyone here this evening, and those who aren't, are sick and tired of the ongoing, oh, we are so concerned, oh, the injustice you face, but have never really done, either the British government or the American government, after 37 years, to end that injustice.
I was a member of the European Scrutiny Committee, which is a select committee, and I've been to Turkey as an applicant country, because we try and do that to assess, you know, what the possibilities are and what their intent is. And my own view is that that is the ultimate way that we can put pressure on Turkey, is if they become a member of the EU, because you've got the rest of the EU countries then could have, you know, a say and in their policy, as it were, and could I'm quite sure, start to talk about conditions. Now, it's also well known that the UK supports that. The UK government supports that, and so does the American government supports that. No, that's right. And yeah, but the issue really is because of the strategic position of Turkey and the link between Europe and into the Middle East. We all know that and understand that. And I think, quite honestly, that until we get that situation arising, then you're still going to struggle. I just think that it's such a complex issue. Until we get them in there and be able to nail them, you know, with that pressure from other European countries, that it's going to be a very, very difficult process. So I think that that's where we should be pressing the buttons, as it were. Well, it could take another 30 years, but I think we need to start trying to push that a bit faster, you know.
More than a letter to David Cameron to make a difference. I've been to Ankara, like Jim, on 3 occasions, and on each occasion I've raised the issue of Cyprus with Turkish politicians. and they consistently get very angry about it. It certainly sets them off, even the mention of it. So this is going to be real hardball stuff to persuade the Turkish politicians to do the right thing. I mean, there's a real difference, it seems to me. On the different times I've been to Ankara, I went once before an election, just before an election, and they were even more animated about it because Turkish public opinion is even angrier than some Turkish political opinion. So absolutely we should send a letter and apply as much pressure and embarrassment as possible to all concerned. But the real key, it seems to me, is Turkey's membership of the European Union. Now, whether they want to be members or not, I just think that it's crazy for the West to push Turkey in an entirely different direction. And I think it's dangerous from the membership of NATO's point of view as well. Because what I detect from Turkish politicians is that they feel that membership of NATO and membership of the European Union should almost qualify each other. And if they make a long-term decision not to be members of the EU, then I think they'll rethink their position on NATO, and Britain and America and the rest of the EU would be wise to persuade them not to seek other defence allegiances. So absolutely send a letter to Cameron. And I'm like Jim, I have no Turkish Cypriot community in Turkish or Greek Cypriot community in my constituency. It just seems to me this is an issue about what is right and wrong, and it's pretty clear to any decent minded politician that what they've done is wrong, but it will be a long, hard negotiation to turn them round.
One would have thought that any civilized nation would be concerned about the humanitarian issues of returning the remains of loved ones to their communities, to their families, after the horrific events that occurred that we all know about in 1974. It's a sad reflection on the authorities that that has not happened. And whilst the EU and to some extent the British government have made monies available and there is the staff to do this work, I know that it isn't going anything like as fast as it should do, and I do think you're absolutely right. We don't need to wait for any long-term solution to do what's right, and that's what we should do, and we should put pressure on, and we should embarrass those that stop that from happening. Similarly, one would have thought that the history, the culture of a nation would be an important, even for others who may not share that history, may not share that culture, it would have been important that they protect it for the future use and knowledge and influence of the communities that will come along. Again, that hasn't happened. There's no reason why these sites should not be protected by the authorities in Northern Cyprus, and we should be urging them to do everything they possibly can. It may well be that we can't reconstitute a lot of these sites until there is a final agreement and reunification of the island, but we can certainly demand that something is done now to protect what remains. And there is a great deal that still remains that needs protection, and we should be urging that on. I'm going to just make two very brief points in relation to the other question that was asked, and in a sense the issues that we're covering again tonight. The first is to make the very obvious point, and I'm sure this will be reflected in this room. Britain has to recognise that it needs to do more to help bring about a solution to the division of the island of Cyprus. And I say that not because it's 2011 and I'm in opposition. I said it when I had a government of my own. I say it now, and we will continue to say it. In a sense, what this meeting is all about, what the demonstration at Trafalgar Square is all about, what all the efforts that the Cypriot community put in is to get Britain to recognise the priority it should be giving to this as an issue. It isn't giving it. You have many friends. I happen to be one who has a large Cypriot community, both Greek and Turkish, but you have lots of friends, as you can see from the top table here, many of whom don't have Cypriots, but who feel strongly about the issue, about the continued division after 37 years, about the fact that the international community have rather passed over Cyprus as an issue. And while they focus continually on the Middle East or on the Balkans or on Afghanistan or in Iraq, if only they would pay attention, a tenth of the attention to Cyprus that they do to all these other issues, then a solution would be there and would be delivered. And we need to, your friends in Parliament and others, need to be reaffirming that message all the time. And secondly, and again this has been reflected round the room, we all need to be putting more pressure on Turkey. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't believe that simply pressure will be enough. You have a carrot and you have a stick, and not just using the stick, we need to use the carrot. Now, I won't get into the details of why, but I disagree with my colleagues on the top table. Whilst I do believe that Turkey wants to turn itself into a regional power, I think there's lots and lots of evidence to suggest that's happening. I don't think in any way that they've forgotten the longer-term ambition to join the European Union for all sorts of reasons. This is one of the prizes that the EKP party, might be rather surprising being a mildly Islamist party, but it has set itself with that as a long-term goal, and that's an opportunity for Cyprus, because that's the route through which pressure can be applied, and we need to exert pressure. Now, I happen to be one of those that believes that the EU has a much more important. Cyprus joined the EU partially in order to help resolve the division of the island, and it's incumbent upon the EU to take that forward along with the UN. And if we're to believe what the Secretary-General of the UN said on the 7th of July, that they're going to have an intensification of the negotiating process, then I think the EU needs to have an intensification of what its role is. I think Britain needs to intensify the role that it's undertaking, and I think we need to have that international conference that everyone is talking about in order to bring that about, because we need to know what Turkey's intentions are. Not when we get to the final signing of the document, we need to know in advance so that we can, and if necessarily, put pressure on them to come into line with the two communities on the island. Let me say one thing finally, and that's in relation to David Cameron. I think it's long overdue that David Cameron met the President of Cyprus. That should be our first priority, meeting the President of Cyprus, to hear directly from the Cypriot representatives what the issues are and what Cyprus is expecting Britain to do to help now that we're going back into intensive negotiations. So I'm very happy to say to David Cameron that he needs to raise this up the political agenda, but he also needs to have a much closer relationship with Cyprus in order that we can achieve that.
Synthesize to some of the issues. You'll understand that representing the constituency of Tottenham, that Tottenham has seen some demographic change in relation to the communities. But I'm very grateful to those, and there's some in this room, I see friends who actually at least for me, brought this issue home through the lens of those missing people. And that's what makes this story the most human of stories. And so it is, you know, clear that that was a humanitarian, huge injustice that has still not been solved or corrected. The International Criminal Court is mentioned. Until there is some justice, there cannot be closure. And indeed, it's very hard to look to the future if the past has not been remedied. So some acceleration, some renewed process needs to take place. And I certainly, as an MP, am happy to put my name to any new initiative, because the language that I've been hearing on this very, very sensitive issue, common to countries like Chile and places like that, has not really changed, has not really moved on. So there needs to be some renewed process. And frankly, you know, there are many countries in Europe, if you like, that can look to periods of shame. But this must be one of the biggest, really, that's gone without any real resolution in the last few years. And I certainly recognise that, and I think that most people do.
You know, because that's the only way that it works. We have Foreign Office questions at least, well, every month. And I don't see any reason why every month there shouldn't be a question on Cyprus, whatever that question may be. We have enough people within the group to ensure, if they all put the question down about Cyprus, I mean, there's other issues going on about Colombia, about Iraq, about Afghanistan, so sort of attention is sort of limited. But there's enough people in the group to ensure there's enough questions go down on Cyprus to make sure that that question is asked at least once a month. Now that's no rocket science. That's just a wee bit of hard work. So you know, it's all about becoming, because politicians know if you're a pain in the arse, they'll try and get rid of you. You're an irritant, and they'll try and get rid of you. So that's, for me, that's the important thing. But just go back to the point that Tom made. I really don't want to sound apathetic and despondent, what have you. I really do think there is a just case, and if we work hard at it, we'll get there. And if you look at, there's two parallels that I would draw your attention to. One is, the first one is Northern Ireland. I can remember going to meetings in Northern Ireland, people say, well, we'll never have peace in Northern Ireland. We do have peace in Northern Ireland. And that was because the politicians eventually got together with the people to make sure that's going to happen. And we can do the same with Cyprus if there's enough public support there. And the other thing for me in the last couple of weeks has been the whole situation surrounding News International and Murdoch. Big player in the world, powerful, no one can touch him or his company. We now see what's happening. So all I'm saying is, you know, things can turn very quickly in politics. Very, very quickly. We need to make sure we're ready and up to date to take it. So I think, you know, we need to be confident what's going to happen. We need to make sure we have a vibrant group that makes sure that we get to the people that matter in order that we can get the arguments across. And you know what, and Jim Dobbin's absolutely right. Jim and I sit in the Council of Europe. David Crosby's on NATO. Don't leave it to us to ask questions and probe questions, what have you. There's probably enough legal, constitutional anoraks in here that would do it for us. All you need to do is to get us the questions. We'll deliver the questions. But you need to make sure that we get them. Don't leave it to us to think about it, because we're also thinking about Cyprus, we'll be thinking about Afghanistan, we'll be thinking about Iraq, we'll be thinking about education, we'll be thinking about health, we'll be thinking about expenses. So it's important that, you know, we get all that across to make sure. I've only kidding around about expenses, by the way. But it's to make sure that we get across the argument that the separate people have a right, justified cost, and the quicker we get a sort of united, independent Cyprus island that most of us can enjoy visiting and, you know, and look forward to visiting. And then
so this does give us some leverage and negotiating power with Ankara, which we wouldn't otherwise have, and I hope that all the member states of the EU will take that very seriously. But it is a huge concern that, as David Burrows has already highlighted that Turkey is still in breach of some of the obligations that it has already taken on, just as a candidate country. Most notably, it still failed to implement the Ankara Protocol, and it's still refusing access to its ports and airspace for Cypriot shipping and aviation. So whilst there is potential in Turkish accession, it's unfortunate that so far it isn't yielding the results that we would like to see. On Michael's question about the priorities for the coalition, rest assured that I take every opportunity to try and raise this with colleagues. I hope that the community will have welcomed the fact that the Europe Minister did recently visit Cyprus, and I welcome the indications that David's had that there would be a sort of positive approach in relation to a potential visit by President Christofias, and I can certainly take up that further with my colleagues. And in terms of the government's wider work in the UN and the EU, I know that the UK government takes these matters very seriously, and I believe that the Cyprus presidency of the EU will be an important opportunity to highlight the issue of Cyprus within all the EU's institutions, and I know that the UK government is very keen to work with the Cyprus government in preparation for their presidency to see if there's anything that we can do to assist them on the Cyprus issue, or indeed any other issues that would come up during their presidency.
Μετά το τέλος της συζήτησης, ο βουλευτής των εργατικών Jeremy Corbyn μίλησε στην κάμερα του Hellenic TV και στη συνεργάτη μας Άννα Μαρία Γεωργή.
Welcome Jeremy Corbyn to the House of Parliament today to talk about the unification of Cyprus and things that are happening on today. Welcome.
Thank you.
First I want to ask you, what do you think, there's been a lot of talks today about putting more pressure about the issues about missing people in Cyprus. Do you think that this is actually going to happen? They've talked about letters to David Cameron and so forth. What do you think? Do you think that this is going to push the British government towards missing people in Cyprus?
We just discussed this in the meeting. We've agreed that all the MPs that came to this evening's meeting are going to sign a letter that's being drafted at the moment, straight away, which will be to David Cameron, our Prime Minister, to say a number of things. One, missing people, take it up with the Turkish government, demand to know what happened to them. Two, destruction of religious monuments, of churches, cemeteries, that was described very well during the meeting this evening, is completely wrong. World heritage of anybody deserves to be preserved and is wrong. And if we've got close relations with Turkey, that is Britain, then that should be raised with Turkey. Thirdly, there's the whole question of Turkey's relationship with Europe and the possibility of European Union membership. That was discussed. Personally, I'm not completely convinced Turkey really wants to join the European Union, but if they say they do, let's put the pressure on, because there has to be a solution to this. I've been involved in this campaign for a very long time. I was a councillor in Haringey in the 1970s when the war took place, and I remember the Cypriot refugees arriving then, and many of those people are here tonight at this meeting. I want them to be able to return home.
Many people today have said that Cyprus is a very significant part of the EU as a nation, as Cyprus itself, not just as part of Greece. Do you think that with everything that's been going on with oil and things in cooperation with Egypt and becoming more recognised within the European Union, that this will push Cyprus further with our battle to get Cyprus back?
It could do a number of things. It could help in that respect because the discovery of hydrocarbons in the sea obviously has a big effect. But Egypt and Turkey are also need each other quite a lot. And so Egyptian support, which at the moment isn't obvious, but it could come, for the right of Cypriot people, for the reunification of Cyprus, you never know. I think we have to use every opportunity.
And also, I'd just like to think, what do you think is going to happen now with this? This is one of the best meetings that we've had so far here in the House of Parliament. Do you think this is going to change things for Cyprus? Do you think this year will maybe make a difference?
Yes, because this is a good meeting. There have been a lot of MPs present, and there is a very good lobby for Cyprus by the Cypriot community in Britain. There's also a lot of support for Cyprus from a lot of other people, including many Kurdish people in Turkey, and I described to the meeting my attendance at a trial of Kurdish people in Turkey last year, and they certainly have a great deal of sympathy with the Cypriot people.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. I really appreciate you being here. I'm sure so did the Cypriot community as well. Thank you so much for talking with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Στο Hellenic TV και στον Κυριάκο Γεωργίου μίλησε και ο Άντι Λόβ, βουλευτής των εργατικών.
It's Kyriakos Georgiou, Hellenic TV, and I'm with Andy Love, MP for Edmonton. Hello, Andy.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm very well.
Good, good. Okay, so you come to these events every year, and I was going to ask you, with the crowd here and the obvious passion, how strong has this conference and these seminars developed, and how is it? And is it perhaps forcing the necessary people to listen more towards the reunification of Cyprus?
Well, first of all, I'm very, very well aware of the strength of feeling in the Greek Cypriot community on the need for a solution to the division of the island of Cyprus. I felt that tonight. I felt that when I came here in previous years. Indeed, I used to be involved before I became a Member of Parliament because I represented the local community and we had a large number of Cypriots living there. So there's no doubt about the urgency that the Cypriot community feel about having a solution. The challenge has been to be able to deliver that, and there are lots of reasons, and we all know them, why even after 37 years we're still not there and we still have a long way to go.
Andy, after 37 years, the island is still divided. You mentioned to me about all these different ideas to reunify the island, but they've sort of gone under the water, so to speak. Why has it been such a stop-start progression? And if there is another plan, a formulation to reunify the island, how will this attempt be different from the others, perhaps?
Well, of course, although it's mainly to do with the Cypriot government and the Turkish Cypriot community finding a solution, there are other parties that are the guarantor powers, Britain, Turkey and Greece. And of course, there's then the international community. And trying to get them all on the same side has been very difficult. The Cypriot community know only too well how difficult it has been to get Turkey to agree to a solution that would meet the aspirations of the Cypriot community. That's been the challenge. We've had times when it's looked very positive that we might be able to reach a solution, and then of course it's fallen away. But I am confident, for all sorts of reasons, that this is the only way forward long term for the stability, not just of Cyprus, but of the whole Eastern Mediterranean. We cannot have a long-term division of the island. We have to reunify the island, and that's not only good for Cyprus and for the Cypriot people, it's good for all the other international partners that have to be involved in this.
Suggesting the island was reunified, maybe if these concerns is sort of a system of government, there would only have to be one government, and the influence of Turkey within that government would be out of the question, of course, but perhaps, so to speak, with the land involved, what would be perhaps the necessary steps to bring in the stability within a reunified island, so to speak?
Well, the first thing we need is the UN to really take charge of this on behalf of the international community. That appears to be happening. They've re-energised the negotiating process, and the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots will be meeting regularly in order to carry that forward. The other thing we need to do is to bring the international, particularly the guarantor powers, together. This isn't just about carrot and stick. This is about ensuring that not only do we put the pressure on those guarantor powers, including Britain. Britain has a major role to play in this, but we need to put it on all the guarantor powers. But we need to also give them the carrot. And the carrot, of course, for Turkey is membership of the European Union. And they want to take that forward. Of course, they're not going to join tomorrow, but they want to see an end to this process. And what I believe that the EU has to do is to hold out the possibility that they will become members of the European Union, which is what they want, but only on the basis that they come to an agreement that meets the needs and the aspirations of the Cypriot people.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Andy Love. And the Cypriot community appreciates all your efforts to reunifying the island, as Hellenic TV does.
Well, let me just say to you, Hellenic, and to your viewers, I've always had a wonderfully warm reception from the Cypriot community. I consider it a great privilege to represent them along with all the others. And of course, many of their problems are the same problems that everybody faces. But I'm always aware when I go into a Cypriot meeting that people will ask me about Cyprus, and rightly so.
Thank you very much.
Ο πρόεδρος της Εθνικής Κυπριακής Ομοσπονδίας, Πίτερ Δρουσιώτης, μίλησε στο συνάδελφό μας Γιάννη Ιωάννου για το τι συζητήθηκε κατά τη διάρκεια του καθιερωμένου λόμπι που έγινε στην Βουλή των Κοινοτήτων.
Κύριε Πίτερ Δρουσιώτη, σήμερα ήταν μία από τις συναντήσεις που γίνονται κάθε χρόνο σχετικά με το εθνικό μας πρόβλημα. Για πέστε μας, ποιος ήταν ο κύριος λόγος για αυτή τη συνάντηση?
Ήταν μια συνάντηση όπου είχαμε την ευκαιρία ως παροικία, τα οργανωμένα σύνολα της παροικίας, η Εθνική Κυπριακή Ομοσπονδία, να καταδικάσουμε μέσα στην Βουλή των Κοινοτήτων την συνεχιζόμενη κατοχή του εδάφους της Κυπριακής Δημοκρατίας από την Τουρκία, να υπενθυμίσουμε στην Μεγάλη Βρετανία, την Βρετανική κυβέρνηση, τις δικές της ευθύνες και υποχρεώσεις προς την Κύπρο, σαν εγγυήτρια δύναμη της ανεξαρτησίας και της εδαφικής ακεραιότητας της Κυπριακής Δημοκρατίας. Ήταν μια ευκαιρία να υπογραμμίσουμε το ρόλο το οποίο μπορεί να διαδραματίσει αυτή η πολύ σημαντική για την Κύπρο χώρα, ούτως ώστε να καμφθεί η αδιαλαξία της Τουρκίας. Ήταν επίσης μια ευκαιρία να στηρίξουμε τις ακούραστες προσπάθειες του Προέδρου της Δημοκρατίας και ολόκληρης της πολιτικής ηγεσίας στο νησί για την πραγματική επανένωση της Κύπρου και του λαού της. Και φυσικά ήταν και μια ευκαιρία να αναπτύξουμε τον διάλογο που πρέπει να έχουμε με φίλους βουλευτές, Βρετανούς βουλευτές, οι οποίοι είναι σε θέση να επηρεάσουν καταστάσεις μέσα στην Βουλή και να συνεργαστούν μαζί μας για την προώθηση μιας δίκαιης και βιώσιμης λύσης του προβλήματος.
Εκτός από τα θέματα τα πιο βασικά, θα έλεγα, σχετικά με την είσοδο της Τουρκίας στην Ευρώπη, με την αδιάλακτη στάση και φυσικά με το θέμα των αγνωμένων, τι άλλο συζητήθηκε?
Συζητήσαμε όλα τα θέματα, τα καυτά θέματα τα οποία αφορούν το γεγονός ότι η Τουρκία για 37 χρόνια κατέχει το έδαφος της Κυπριακής Δημοκρατίας ατιμόρυτη. Συζητήσαμε το γεγονός ότι η Τουρκία έχει προσπαθήσει να αλλάξει τον δημογραφικό χαρακτήρα του νησιού με την μεταφορά Τούρκων πολιτών στα κατεχόμενα εδάφη. Μιλήσαμε για το γεγονός ότι οι αγνοούμενοι για 37 χρόνια αγνοούνται, δεν ξέρουμε την τύχη αυτών των ανθρώπων και ότι αυτή είναι μια εντελώς ανθρωπιστική, είναι ένα ανθρωπιστικό θέμα το οποίο χρειάζεται απαντήσεις από την Τουρκία και ζητήσαμε να εξασκηθούν πιέσεις πάνω στην Τουρκία, ειδικά για αυτό το ανθρωπιστικό θέμα, το οποίο αφορά εκατοντάδες Κύπριους, συμπεριλαμβανομένων γυναικών και παιδιών, οι οποίοι χάθηκαν κατά τη διάρκεια της εισβολής και γνωρίζουμε ότι στα αρχεία του τουρκικού στρατού υπάρχουν πληροφορίες όσον αφορά τι έγινε με αυτούς τους ανθρώπους. Καλύψαμε επίσης θέματα τα οποία αφορούν την καταστροφή της κληρονομιάς της Κύπρου στα κατεχόμενα και τρόπους για την διατήρηση της κουλτούρας, του πολιτισμού και των εκκλησιών στην κατεχόμενη Κύπρο.
Και κλείνοντας, σχετικά με τις προηγούμενες χρονιές, ποια είναι η ανταπόκριση του Βρετανού βουλευτού στο θέμα της Κύπρου?
Είχαμε μια πολύ επικοδομητική συνάντηση. Μπορώ να σας πω ήταν η πιο καλή συνάντηση εδώ στην Βουλή με βουλευτές, όπου είχα την ευκαιρία να προεδρεύσω τα τελευταία 5 χρόνια. Είχαμε μια πολύ καλή προσέλευση βουλευτών από τα μεγάλα κόμματα και ήδη οι βουλευτές τόνισαν ότι θέλουν να συνεργαστούν μαζί μας, ότι θεωρούν το κυπριακό πρόβλημα ένα από τα καυτά προβλήματα στον κόσμο, το οποίο χρειάζεται να προωθηθεί ακόμα περισσότερο πάνω στην ατζέντα της εξωτερικής πολιτικής της Μεγάλης Βρετανίας. Έτσι είμαι αρκετά ικανοποιημένος με τα τι έχω ακούσει και θα πάρουμε και πρωτοβουλίες μαζί με αυτούς τους βουλευτές, ούτως ώστε να σταλούν επιστολές στον Πρωθυπουργό, τον κύριο David Cameron, με τις απαιτήσεις μας.
Κύριε Πιέτρου, Πρόεδρε της Εθνικής Κυπριακής Ομοσπονδίας, ευχαριστούμε πολύ για τον χρόνο και ελπίζουμε όλα να πάνε καλύτερα για ένα καλύτερο μέλλον.
Και εγώ σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Ευχαριστώ.